back, relax, and maybe get yourself a snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hi guys, so I am here today to do a book review. Assassin's Quest, which is the third one in the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb. I was incredibly excited to get to this book because I really enjoyed book 1 and 2 of this trilogy, and unfortunately this didn't quite live up to what I was hoping for. There were still good bits, but there were a lot of bad bits, so let's talk about this book. The things that I really enjoyed about book number 1 and 2 was that the story was long. It's definitely a slow pace that Robin Hobb likes to write at, and she likes to ease you into the story, but her writing was really good. Even though book 2 was a little bit dragged out, I still really enjoyed it. This one, unfortunately, was just so incredibly long, and there were so many pages where I felt like nothing was happening and nothing was contributing to the story in a major way. It definitely could have been maybe a 400-page book at most. This is 850-ish pages, so it's ridiculously long, and it's just not worth the length. If this had been a much shorter and more condensed version of what it was, I think I would have really enjoyed it. But having 600 pages of just building up to the ending, where it's a big journey and really nothing is happening for most of the time, which is what this has, not really a fan of that, I must say. And I read the Wheel of Time books and I read slow books all the time, but this one was torturous to get through. It was so long, so dull, and the same things kept on happening. There was so much repetition in what was happening to our main character that I just did not enjoy this book at all for the first 2/3 of it, and then the last third was pretty decent. Things really picked up in the last third and it was really enjoyable, but it just did not cancel out the fact that the first 2/3 were so slow and I just did not enjoy them. So in the end I actually had to get the audiobook in order to finish this book up, which shows you that this really was not a great book in my opinion. I think it could have been brilliant, and I think her writing was still beautiful, her prose was still beautiful, the story was still entertaining. It just needed to be so much shorter, and the pacing was what really let this book down. This is the continuation of Fitz's story, Fitz Chivalry, and we follow him as he goes on another big adventure. This time he is on a quest, essentially, and he is travelling across the land, which is the majority of this book, him travelling across the land. This book, I just felt like it started off similarly to book number 2, and book number 2 and 3, Fitz starts off as a very moody, sulky character. Due to things from the book before, he gets into some scrapes and situations that kind of justify his moodiness, but not for like 200 pages. I didn't care for him to be that moody for that long. I wish that he had kind of bucked himself up and got his character back in order a bit quicker than he did, because he was quite an irritating character, especially in this book. Not so much in the second, but definitely in this book. Maybe the bad beginning sort of put me in a bad frame of mind for the rest of this book, but I just didn't enjoy going into a story and instantly feeling a bit depressed, because it is a very depressing beginning and there's bad things happening and the characters are grumpy and they're falling out. I didn't like that. I didn't enjoy going back into a book that welcomes you with a kind of slap in the face. It just wasn't an enjoyable read from the get-go, which is a real disappointment because I was expecting massive things, and massive things do happen in this book. I don't want people to think that the whole book is terrible, because it's not. It's just that I had a real problem with the pacing of this book. It could have been brilliant, it just wasn't. Fitz becomes a really moody and aggressive character in this one. He alienates everyone, so he's actually alone for the majority of this book, which again is probably why I didn't enjoy it as much. I really like some of the other characters from the previous 2 books, and we don't see very much of them in this book. It's mostly revolving around Fitz and Night Eyes, and even then Night Eyes isn't there the whole time either, so there's all sorts of craziness that happens, but most of it focuses on Fitz and solely Fitz, which means that if you don't like the character of Fitz, which I didn't in this book, I thought he was too annoying at points and really quite an idiot at other points, then you're not going to enjoy it as much as the other books where you have the other characters to balance out his personality. In reality, this is a book about a boy becoming a man, and it was good in that it definitely progressed the character of Fitz. We see him face a lot more things that he has to deal with. We see him kind of own up to some of his own secrets, and his own past has to be faced. He has to face nasty characters from the previous 2 books, and it is all very exciting for the first time it happens, but then we get a lot of repetition in this book where the same thing keeps on happening, and our main character seems to get himself into the same situation over and over and over and over again. And that really, really annoyed me, because I was like, come on, you should have learnt this by now, let's not do this again. But unfortunately, he just didn't learn it for a very, very long time, which I think, again, was another reason I was very frustrated with this book. I also felt like there were quite a lot of predictable bits within this, because there were things hinted at in book 1 and 2 where we get an idea that this thing might have happened, and in this one, Fitz still doesn't know, but we as the reader have probably already figured it out. And there were a lot of places where we came to a scene that I had already pretty much figured out what was going to happen just from reading the last 2 books and this book. That was a little bit irritating as well, because if it had happened like as soon as I figured it out, it would be fine, but if I figured it out 100 or so pages before and then it didn't happen for another 100 pages, but I already knew it was going to happen, that was a little bit irritating as well. So this book really did suffer from some issues, and it could have been so good, which I think is why I'm judging it so harshly, because I'm comparing it to book 1 and 2, which were really good in my opinion, and this one just wasn't as good as those at all. It wasn't even slightly on par, and that was a big disappointment. I did really enjoy the ending of this book. I thought that there were some really, really wonderful visionary things that happened in the ending. For example, when we see the statues, we get a really vivid description of how that is going and what the statues are like. And if you've read this book, you'll know what the statues are of. But I really, really enjoyed seeing that scene where they were in between all the statues, and it was really, really beautifully described how everything was looking and what it was all like, so I could vividly imagine that scene, and that was a really, really wonderful part of the book. From then on, I felt like the book really took off and things started to happen, and even though it was still slow-ish, it was nowhere near as bad as the beginning and the middle of this book. The ending definitely picked up, but it was such a trial getting to the ending that was my biggest problem with it. I really liked some of the action scenes within this book. I felt like they were very easy to visualise, and I really enjoyed reading about them. However, I just felt like none of these good things really cancelled out the bad things, and therefore I couldn't give this a very high rating. I have heard very, very good things about Hobb's later books, and maybe it's because this is her first trilogy that she just didn't know how to end it properly, or maybe it was just too drawn out and maybe her later books are better. I have heard a lot of people say that her later books get much, much better, and I know that her most recent book or series, Fitz in the Fall, seems to have been really, really highly praised. So I'm definitely going to read more from Robin Hobb because I loved the first 2 books. I think maybe this one just wasn't for me in the pacing, and that is all I have to complain about, but it's a big complaint. So yeah, I ended up only giving this book a 2 out of 5 stars, which wasn't amazing, but it wasn't terrible either. It was just an okay book, and it was only just an okay book. It was bad in places and good in places, so that averaged at an okay. Overall, I wouldn't recommend this one personally. I didn't enjoy it that much. I would say you could probably skip to about the 600th page and then the story starts from there, so you'd probably be fine. But obviously there is stuff that happens on the long journey. It just wasn't as important as the ending, and a lot of it was kind of set up for, I assume, what is going to happen in the later books and things like that. So definitely interested to find out more from Fitz in the future, and definitely interested to read more Robin Hobb. But this one was not for me. 2 out of 5 stars. Definitely do let me know your thoughts on this. I would absolutely love to know whether you liked it or disliked it, because I feel like my opinion is probably going to be the unpopular one here. But I do want to know what you guys think. Definitely leave me comments and I will chat to you guys about this. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye! Me and you gonna have a little